right, good day, folks. This is Matthew Broughton here with Madison 365 on Find the Warmth of Your Sun. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and yeah. So today I'm going to be covering, continuing a dive in jails and criminal justice system, both as an update of sorts and commentary on the happenings of the county board and the new county jail, or the potential new county jail, as well as exploring a little bit more about women in prisons and taking a little bit deeper dive about real world issues and experiences, and hopefully highlighting, these are inhumane facilities. There's nothing we can do to make our jails, prisons, particularly how our current justice system is structured, to be humane. Nothing really about it. There's nothing centering humanity, and that's a problem. It's a real problem. But if you didn't know, this past Thursday, the Dane County Board approved over $700,000 in additional fees of consulting work to Mead Hunt on a larger jail project that is $148 million. And Mead Hunt, let's say there's a good chunk of this money that Mead Hunt charged. Basically, this additional money is because Mead Hunt went and did work that the county didn't ask them to do, and then charged the county for it. And then the county board was like, well, you did the work, we'll accept the work, here's your money. They say this was in the justification that one of the supervisors said was that they spent an extra $700,000 to save $22 million. Well, it might have reduced $22 million, but again, this was work that the county didn't ask. So retroactively paid for work they didn't ask for. It's a horrible practice. Now, setting that precedent, anybody can go on that has a contract to do work that the county didn't ask for and then present it and be, here you go. And that is not, and then that goes beyond the fact that there has been monumental public input from long ago, from before even 2015, from before that, of people being, we don't want a new jail. Now, there are folks that have argued that the current jail is inhumane. My understanding is that they've already spent money to update it and bring it up to present day standards. Well, again, no jail is inhumane. It is humane, particularly in the United States. And this jail itself is a problem because it centralizes community resources in the jail, created a one-stop hub, and basically reaffirms the problem, digs in the fact that, particularly in Dane County, there are more resources in jail, especially for those in juvenile detention, than there are outside of jail. So again, our jail fails to actually rehabilitate folks, but there's more resources for folks than when they get back out into the community, when we really need, beyond the fact that, again, we really need to support folks in jail and have less folks in jail, but we're failing them outside. And this just doubles down and continues to spend money where we already don't need the resources. If we have more money in our community, we are preventing people from going to jail. And there's all the arguments that this new jail is designed to decrease jail population because it's smaller in size, while ignoring the fact that it's modular and that it can increase beds to actually be beyond what the current jail houses. It is very rare that a jail doesn't end up reaching its maximum detention, and oftentimes goes over for a variety of different reasons, but it's very rare. So this is not a decreased amount of jail. And it also doesn't really dig into and pull in what we have recently learned, or just those that didn't know through COVID and releasing a lot of folks, is that a lot of people that are in jail don't need to be in jail, particularly if we have community-based resources for these people. Progressives self-described progressives, seem more willing to invest massive amounts and continuous amounts of money into warehousing people than investing into people, twisting themselves in justification, and just engaging in conversations that just don't really get to the depth of it, and ignoring public commentary and public input and how much of our community just doesn't want it for their own reasons that twist themselves into knots to justify. And oftentimes might be deciding to spend their own time instead of engaging in the serious conversation of this and the thoughts behind it into, let's say, a county board cookbook. They don't want to engage in the true dynamics of building a new warehouse for people, which is inhumane. And how many resources we perpetually invest at the cost of other resources in the warehousing of people, and not investing in the best of ourselves and uplifting people and supporting them before and after they, enter jail. Beyond aspects of our laws and how people end up in jail for fines or misdemeanor offenses, and how we can explore ways to further invest in diversion programs and support for people to keep them out of jail. Now, again, people love to fall back on the crime, but why are you so these things our jails don't rehabilitate people. They don't. They really don't. Why? If you feel dead set that we have to oppressively punish people for crimes they committed, and this is state violence, we need to interrogate why you might feel the need to do this, to hurt people more than what is already going on. Because we know a lot of folks in our jail are suffering from mental health issues, are experiencing poverty, and are in jail because of poverty, meaning that they wouldn't have landed in the life position that they did if they weren't experiencing poverty, which is a social problem. When we don't have the jobs and resources to uplift people, to support people. We have them, but we don't invest in them. Why do we feel the need to violently hurt people as a government, as a society? That's not justice, that's retribution, that's vengeance. Healing them and finding ways to support them in their life struggles so that they don't actually end up back to committing a crime, or what we might dub a crime, is what's needed. Investing in healing victims of crimes. And honestly, property crimes are overstated many times as crimes, and often get overemphasized and overpunished for a lot of crimes do. And I'll kind of wrap this back around to Dane County, but that's the high level report. And I really originally wanted to plan on digging a bit more into women in prison. And these two things are tied together, particularly in our county, or really any county, any city, and the experience of women in jail. The ACLU had a really good report on this that dived into an Indigenous woman's experience in this. But within it, they found that correction officers in women's jails and prisons are mostly men. Over 70% of correctional officers in jails for women are mostly men. Most are allowed to also watch women when they're dressing, showering, or using the toilet. Harassment by these of women by these guards is pervasive. Documentation of groping, sexual assault, and other sexual abuse by male staff, particularly during pat-downs and frisk searches. And the Vera Institute of Justice found that 86% of women in jail have also experienced sexual violence before even landing in jail, and experiencing further sexual violence caused by these guards. This ACL report on this Indigenous woman, Dorothy, she was charged with first-degree murder for killing her abusive husband, ultimately to protect not only herself, but her first child, who was born early because of the abuse she suffered, and to protect another unborn child that she didn't even want to tell her abusive husband that she's pregnant for fear of her safety and her unborn child's safety. And in Dorothy's prison housing unit, one correctional officer began to signal her out, asked for sexual favors in exchange for food and really her normal share of personal hygiene products, extorting her for sexual favors. She didn't think it was serious at first, but then the threats became real, where this guard started withholding about half her meals, soap, and toilet paper. She tried to go through the normal process of reporting this, but there's fear of retribution and, real retribution. She attempted to sue, bring this to the federal level, but because of federal rules and regulations and laws, you basically have to go through all the reporting structures before you can bring a federal civil rights violation or suit to these folks, making it very, very difficult for prisoners, any prisoner, to charge and bring charges or bring light to the abuse they might be suffering from correctional officers. And then that's compounded, particularly in women prisons. There's real, Amnesty International has documented real retribution and attempting to hold guards accountable. Many state guards have actually accessed and encouraged to review inmates' personal history files, any records of complaints against themselves or other prison authorities. Guards threaten the prisoner's children and visitation rights as a means of silencing women. They issue rule infraction tickets, which extend their stay in prison if they speak out. Dubbed a problem, a so-called problem inmate. And prisoners that complain frequently are placed in administrative segregation. Further, with the Amnesty International, they talk about kind of formal procedures, legislation, and reporting capacity within U.S. jails and prisons account for much of the ongoing sexual abuse, basically, within women, abuse of women. According to the U.S. Department of Justice from 1997, only 10 prison employees in the entire federal system were disciplined and only 7 were prosecuted. It doesn't seem to have gotten much better, and we'll get to exactly why it's a little hard to know where things are at right now. And basically, if a prison official is found guilty, they're transferred to somewhere else, another facility, and not fired. And this lack of accountability of those that are supposed to be so-called protecting or supervising, from police to prison guards to judges, there's a lack of accountability in their behavior that oftentimes perpetuates racial oppression, gender oppression, sexual orientation, oppression of sexual identity. It's rough out here for a lot of folks, for a lot of reasons. But there's further on, there's inadequate reproductive health care. The National Institute of Corrections found that gynecological services for women in prisons is absolutely inadequate. At this point, this is in the 90s, but about half of state prisons surveyed officer female specific services as mammograms and pap smears, and often entail a long wait to be seen. Offer female services, about half, not officers. There's also shackling during pregnancy of all prisoners in many states and in many counties. This is a policy of federal, prisons and the U.S. Marshal Service, and exists in almost all state prisons. There's a shackling during labor that oftentimes causes complications during labor, be it from hemorrhaging or decreased fetal heart rate. And there's also delays in cesarean C-sections when needed. Oftentimes, even if there's 5 inch delay in those things, there could be permanent brain damage to the child. And that's before, and there's a lot of regulations that oftentimes mothers are barely able to hold their child after giving birth before they're ripped away. We know this is a particularly important part in just the well-being of a newly born baby. And already at that point, the birth is traumatic on the baby. Afterbirth is traumatic on the newborn child. And so from the jump, this society is then engaging in trauma on this child who, for a variety of reasons, from the mess of our foster care to lack of actually good pre-K and childcare for kids, particularly, newborns, and how expensive this stuff is, already experiencing trauma, which means that they're more likely to end up intersecting with the criminal justice system as they age because of this trauma that they had no choice in, that they experienced beyond any of their control. And that's before the dehumanizing and traumatic experiences being perpetuated on the mother. And the violence that is. Again, this mentality of we must perpetuate almost the maximum amount of violence and oppression and punishment on people. It's very puritanical and doesn't work, and is also a horrendous mentality to have and hold and perpetuate. It's pervasive throughout our system. About 48 to 88% of women inmates have experienced sexual assault, physical abuse before coming to prison, suffer PTSD, but very few of the jails and prisons actually have mental health services on top of the trauma and stress that it is being incarcerated, on top of the trauma and stress that these guards are causing upon these women. But why don't we know more? There are inmate surveys conducted at times by the Bureau of Justice Statistics. But out of, in 2018, out of 12,486 scientific articles published, only 21 studies included original data about healthcare of prisoners over the age of 50 in U.S. state or federal prisons. And the majority focused on men. A 2014 study found 327 women, average age 56, incarcerated at prisons in 5 states in the South, found female inmates average 4 chronic medical conditions and received 5 daily medications, had frequently history of victimization, high rates of mental health issues, and challenges with negotiating healthcare. We don't really know the full state of the dehumanization and abuse our women are experiencing in our jails and prisons. Most of the time it's focused on men. And it's not to say that we shouldn't highlight what's going on with men, and we absolutely should that, but this needs to be a holistic approach because the entirety of our justice system is monumentally abusive in so many ways. And particularly for women, it continues to perpetuate the violence and oppression faced on the outside. It does anything but protect women. And most of these women aren't even here for even violent crimes, let alone the fact that somehow the people justify enacting violence on people because we call them criminals, because they might have perpetuated violence. Again, that's retribution. That's not justice. So far from justice. And you need to ask ourselves again why we keep doing this. Which brings me back around to Dane County and our own DA, Ishmael Ozan, who has shown a history of charging women who have defended themselves against intimate partner abuse. And a lot of times what we see both in Ozan and just across the country is there might be a woman who's experienced perpetual abuse, have tried to report or tried to escape, but at times so-called not enough. And they might have been in an argument with somebody and then committed violence upon their intimate partner who had a history of committing violence upon them. Basically, it's viewed as them as in themselves as an act of self-defense because the situation they are in is volatile and they can be violently abused almost at any moment at a drop of a hat. But because that action might not be in immediate direct response to violence they faced. They didn't get, it wasn't a so-called self-defense where they were hit and then they hit back their charge. But even then, there's a lot of times that women have been charged when faced with that immediate violence, when being beaten, when being attacked or ran after. Ozan has only seemed to respond to not pursuing charges when there's been intense public pressure, such as a year or so ago, when a woman was facing charges when she was attempting to escape abuse from an ex-boyfriend, and the police basically didn't respond to protect her, and she ended up shooting him when he broke into a house, and she was initially charged. Ozan kind of withered on the vine a bit and didn't really respond until there was intense public pressure to drop charges, and then he dropped charges. But there's some back and forth between the DA's office and police about whose responsibility it was to bring charges, and nobody really took accountability for themselves. Oftentimes, police do arrest somebody for a charge, and then a district attorney then continues to pick up that charge and run with it. Sometimes it's changed, but neither one takes direct responsibility for the charge. The police will be like, well, it's on the DA to actually do the charging, and then the DA will be like, well, they arrest them for this thing, and so then I have to charge them for it. And it's this kind of this back and forth. But it's a problem, and it's something that our new jail, again, won't address. These are the structural issues that we aren't looking to address. And that's on top of, again, our juvenile issues and our failure to support people when they aren't actually in jail in real and humane ways. We have a problem. This county has a problem. And an inability to stop perpetuating institutional oppression at various different levels. It's a tough mentality to break. There is so much self-justification and rhetorical hoops people jump through to justify themselves that they're making the right decision when they're not. They're just not. And I don't know how we get some of these folks to break their mentality. I really don't. It's you gotta kind of keep hammering away, but it's hard. It's really hard to do that. So I think we have to keep exposing hypocrisies, keep organizing, keep pushing against them. I want to commend the 17 board members who voted against this, particularly the white folks. And let's also be clear, basically all of the county board supervisors of color have been against this jail for, since it's there. And basically all the support for it has been from white supervisors, many of them calling themselves progressive, many of them saying we need to listen to black and brown people and black women and listen to women. And well, when it's time to listen, they get their Apple iPods in and would rather talk about a cookbook than listen to those who are most impacted by our criminal justice system and the violence that it costs upon people. Well, that is it for this week. Thanks for coming to Finding the Warmth of Our Sun. I am Matthew Brungen here at Masson 365. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher, and Apple Podcasts. Thanks for coming. Please get the vaccine if you're able to, and continue to mask up as we got some of those strains around here. And it's getting nice outside, so it's I'd expect to see a spike before things continue to get better. But thanks for coming, and have a good one.
This is 365 Media.